everybody, welcome back to another Startup Founder Chat with my friend Juan Romero, CEO of Volante Software, your host Craig Shacklett, CEO of TRIO360. Juan, how are you, sir?
Doing well, sir. How are you? It's good to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you. Next time we do this, I think we're going to actually be face-to-face in Las Vegas at the NIGA show, the National Indian Gaming Association show, July 20, I should know this, I just got my flights, July 21st and 22nd, is that right?
Yeah, something like that. Wednesday and Thursday, 2 weeks from now, right? Or something like that. So yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, 2 weeks from now. So we'll be doing this face-to-face. By the time people are seeing this, it may be a couple days before the show. So if you're going, come find us. We got a booth, TRIO360 does. But we were talking a little bit off camera about how kind of the prep work that goes into getting ready for a show. We've done a show one time before in 2017, but this is our first one in a long time. And there's a lot of prep around what kind of material are we gonna have ready, what are we gonna give out, what kind of demos do we wanna do, how are we gonna schedule the demos? Because normally our demo is around 30, 45 minutes and we block out an hour so we can chat, but obviously on trade show floor, maybe you're getting 10, 15 minutes. How do you decide what to cut in the demo? So why don't we talk about demos?
Yeah.
You want to start there?
Sure. One of the things that's interesting that I'll be, looking forward to hearing back from you on is, you have all this outside stimuli that's going to be happening, right? So you're going to have your place on the floor. Of course, all the big dogs are going to be there with their, their models that are displaying products and their bars and their little negotiation rooms and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's going to be certainly different, right? And how do you capture somebody and their attention and like maximize that potential, because you basically not only have one shot, but you have like minutes, right? So yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure. I can't wait to hear how it goes. Yeah, thank you. A customer in a sense, but he's also kind of a sales mentor. He's been a successful enterprise sales guy for a long time, Jared. He gave me some good advice. It's like, listen, in the demo, maybe when it's a one-on-one demo, like a long form demo, like a typical one where you are blocking an hour or longer, it's like you're trying to sell it. You're trying to close a deal potentially or move along that process. This one on the trade show, it's really just giving them enough to wet their whistle. Kind of set the hook a little bit, and then you're working to schedule the longer demo. So that helped with my mindset going in. It's really like, okay, what is the 10 minutes while I have somebody's attention that's really going to get them to be like, wow, I need to see more. So that helped us, rather than just try to do the entire demo and just cut corners and try to take 30 minutes and collapse it to 10. It's like, okay, what is the like one or two pieces in our demo that we're going to pop people with and be like, hey, if you want to see more, let's set up that follow-up appointment. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because essentially you're really looking at as a component of the larger whole, right? As opposed to the end all be all. We've kind of done some changes on our end recently, most recently at a property that we were out in California. We did kind of a sales tour down there in the southern area, but some very, very large properties. And right before we went out there, like, we just changed up the approach, which was a little bit scary, because when you're going to the second largest floor in California to debut your new format, right? You really haven't got a chance to really know what the impacts are. But to us, the real thing was two things. One is we don't really have a structured demo anymore. So we're basically trying to take what the person is showing interest in, the types of questions that they're asking, and let that drive the actual demonstration itself, right? So before, we kind of had this format and this logical progression through the modules. Now it's like, what kind of questions is Craig asking? And based on that, we might go in a completely different direction. So, that may be something that you're able to take as well, in the layout of your current flow, and go, all right, well, let's just drive it based on the one or 2 points that really resonates with them. And so that worked extremely well for us. It takes a lot longer to train people to do that, and they really have to know what they're talking about, because there's no script, right? You're basically going to go wherever the client takes you, but it's most impactful. So that was the first part of what we changed. The second part was getting the application into their hands, right? So before it was like basically me pontificating and showing them how easy the system is to use. We went and bought a series of iPads and now iPods because the feedback that we heard from them was that I'm demoing on this, which is awesome, right? But they use this on the floor, right? Which is basically a sixth of the size. And so now we went and bought these so we can use both. But basically what we did, as opposed to me talking, is I stood up there and we put an iPod in each one of their hands, tried to position a Volante salesperson with them, and then went through the process. And instead of me saying, look how easy it is to take a progressive meter reading, we said, let's take progressive meter readings. And they did it while we were doing the demo.
Wow, that's really smart. So you, in the demo, they're actually doing it. It's almost training combined with the demo.
Right. Yeah. And so, I think there was a couple different things that translated there. The first thing being that all the stuff that I'm spouting off about, standing on top of, and the quality of the product. And I mean, because you think of a demo kind of as this controlled process, right? To put your best foot forward. So, if there's something that's a little weird in the UI, or there's an unexpected result, or there might be bugs, do you necessarily want to give that to a client? No, probably not, right? You want to structure your demo around that to mitigate any of that weird stuff. Well, here we're kind of just taking off the mask, if you will, and we're like, all right, I'm up here saying how easy it is and how there's going to be no problem for you to implement. Put it in your hands. Let's see where you get stuck. Now, we did we've done all the testing and all the legwork on the back end to make sure that we kind of avoid those potential issues. And like the biggest thing that I learned when we were out there was I asked those guys candidly, I said, this is the first time we've ever demoed like this. Did you like it? And they said, yeah, the only two pieces of feedback we have for you is, number one, we need to see it on the device that they actually use on the floor. Easy solution. Go buy iPods, right? Second thing was, your cases suck. So I bought these cases for these iPads, and because I didn't want them to get trashed, and they were tilting all weird. So we ended up taking them off in the middle of the demo, but those were the only two things that they have feedback on. And I'm like, well, those are both easy fixes.
I like that a lot. Now, is your demo something that, it sounds like with that, if it's a real device, you have to do it in person.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, ideally, yeah. So I've been thinking of ways that we can do it, right? So our app is in the App Store. I mean, we could just as easily stage with them to get them to configure and do something on their end, and it shouldn't be too hard. But I'm trying to figure out with the dev team, how we can just get a copy of the iOS application in their hands, even remotely. So if they're doing it, we could, because that would be the ideal thing. I mean, when we do an in-person demo and they're touching it, it's completely different. So I haven't figured it out yet, but that's something that we're definitely working on. But I think that could be something that could be very beneficial for you, is those two things that we learned, which is one, just you only have a limited capacity. If you can speak to the most important thing, which you can derive from the questions that the individual is asking, you can really touch what is meaningful to them, which is going to have reverberations downstream in terms of actually front of mind awareness, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, if you put it in their hands, in that capacity, there's much greater chance for them to stay standing in front of you, right? I mean, because our demos will typically last, we used to do them in 45 minutes. Now they can take up to 2.5 hours, depending on how many modules people want to see. And it starts off with, I want to see these 2 modules, and then they see all 7 and the 2 that we're building. And so we're there for 3 hours. Well, you don't think by 2 hours and 10 minutes in, I see people nodding off? Of course, right? That's just forever to be sitting there. But you put a device in their hand and make it interactive, that dissipates completely.
It's funny, for us, we started with, I don't know if it was like that for you when you started demoing the product. For us, it was like, we have this product, and it's how do we demo it? And my first demos were kind of scattershot, in the sense that I would just be like, well, here's a cool feature, check this out. Here's, what do you think about this? What questions do you have? And they'd bring up something, I'd go to another feature. And after I did more demos, I realized that a lot of the things that we do with TRIO, it's more than just making their current processes better and more efficient. Some of it is a mindset shift, where it's like, you're doing it this way and going A, B, C, D, E, F, and here we're going to say you're going to start at C, and then skip over to G and I. And I realized I actually had to go the other way, where our demos are now more of a story arc, where it's like, all right, let's start with a day in the life of a marketer. Actually, we preface the demos by like talking about the 3 time buckets of a casino host. And it's like, hey, when they're selling, when they're talking to players and getting them in the door, getting trips that wouldn't have happened otherwise, they're generating the most revenue. When the second bucket is players are on a trip, they're spending time with them, building the relationship, there's value there. It's not as much of an incremental revenue driver as booking new trips, but there's value there. The third bucket is administrative tasks that are just burning money. And because you're not building relationships, you're not driving new trips, all you're doing is wasting their time. That could be in other buckets. So we start with like, here's the mindset, here's an equation that demonstrates it. All right, now let's get into the demo. And then we walk through a story of like pulling the list of players, sending out messaging, and then kind of going through from there. And I love like your method clearly works, because it's one, you guys are selling like crazy, you're on fire, and these slot people, I can see them saying like, oh man, this solves this problem. What about this? What do you have? And you've already thought through all these different modules. So your product may be better tailored for that approach than ours. But I don't know. I need to think through it, because on the demo floor at the trade show, where I only have like 10 minutes to tell a piece of that story, they may say like, hey, listen, here's our problem. It's with booking events. What do you have for that? And then I'd have to pivot, which would be more of your approach. But
it's interesting. It's interesting that you say that, because I like demoed the way that I demo now, right? With kind of this no outline. It was just something that kind of made sense to me. And we went through this period where we weren't selling anything, right? Like 3-4 years ago, people were interested, but we couldn't get over the hump, right? And so I spent all this time working with the sales team and researching like the best pitch decks on earth, right? Basically. So every single article, and it basically said exactly what you're saying, right? Is like, you got to frame out what the issues are. You got to like name the enemy. You got to like paint this picture of the future and how you like basically are going to take on that quote unquote enemy, and then kind of walk them through the process. So I spent literally like a month just revamping the entire pitch to do just that, right? Whether it was visuals and this messaging and all this kind of stuff. And like the demo was tight. It was a good demo. But I went back and demoed to 2 customers that had already bought, that had went to other properties. And the guy tells me, the director of operations pulls me to the side and he goes, "Can I tell you something?" He goes, "I think we know each other at this point." And I go, "Yeah, absolutely, man." And he goes, "Why did you change your demo?" He's like, "We don't want to hear all that. You think that we don't know what the problems are?" He's like, "The thing that made your demo perfect was you weren't selling us anything. You were having a conversation with us. And now you're over here showing us slides about what's ineffective and what's obsolete." He's like, "We've been doing this for 30 years. We know what's obsolete and what's ineffective. Like I understand the mindset." So we shifted after that. But I thank Oliver for that, because he's the one that told us. He pulled me aside and said, "You need to stop doing what you think you're doing is not the right thing to do." And the second he said that, I heard it from one other person the next demo I did, and that was the last time I did that demo.
Now, it's funny. So do you think that process of getting a tight demo helped you go back? Because you did say you went through kind of a dry spell and we need to revamp it. And then obviously you came out of the dry spell. Do you think that process of building a process made your kind of more free-flowing demos work better?
Well, it certainly reinforced and brought more confidence to the approach that we had, right? I mean, because if you do the same thing over and over, you're going to get the same result, right? And the thing that was frustrating me is we were getting close, but we weren't getting there, right? And so what I think it did is it changed the tone, right? In terms of like reassuring us that we were on the right track. But the second thing too is the big takeaway that I really took away from him, if you just strip away that whole message, was be yourselves and have a conversation with us the way you've been. This, the reason that we're even talking to you, which really, if I look at it at that point where we were and the people we were talking to, we actually didn't even have no business talking to them anyway. So the fact that we were pitching to them was because we were already doing something different. I just didn't recognize it, right? So once it was kind of that scope was broadened and kind of this other, you know, the approach was questioned, especially, you know, it's funny, and I want your take on this, because at this point, I've basically abandoned all the tenets of good structured business. Like now, I look for the antithesis of any of those things. So if you tell me that I should do sales this way, I'm gonna do the opposite. If you tell me that this is the way a go live should go, we're not that. Just because you say that that's the way that it's gone for, you know, within the gaming vertical and in others, we're not gonna do it that way. I can tell you right now. And now I have, because of this back and forth that you were asking about, I have much more confidence going, yeah, we don't need to follow that. We're going to make our own path for what we want to do with ABC.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, because obviously you can't be an innovative company if all you're doing is following what other people are doing. So you have to blaze your own trails. I think for us, it's like we've had paths where we're like, all right, everyone's doing this, we're going to do here. And then at some point, sometimes you realize like, okay, well, there's a reason everyone's doing this.
Yeah.
And you kind of come back to that. But then sometimes it's like you end up creating something that's so far advanced because you're not evolving, just following other people. Now this is like the thing that they're trying to catch up to. So yeah, I mean, it's good, like you have the courage to do that. And obviously I think sometimes you'll try something total opposite and you'll be like, maybe we should go with something more conventional, but obviously what you're doing is working. So,
well, the thing is too, and I mean, what's your take on this, is like our whole job as, you know, the quote unquote tip of the spear is to, you know, guide the direction. And if we're not like continually, I mean, because what we're doing in essence is challenging the very core of these processes that our applications address, right, or attempt to address and are used. So we have to continually, through whatever mechanism is available to us, challenge and change that route. And it's like you said, I mean, there's times where we're going to go out on a path and end up on the established path, but even then it's going to be different, right? I mean, it's going to, because your customers are coming and they're talking to you because you're breaking new ground. I mean, and that's what TRIO is. It doesn't exist. It's something that's direly needed. And to me, you're in that phase that we were in where you're just kind of, you're honing it, right? And you're taking little pieces here and there. So where do you feel like you're at in that process? Do you feel like you're still collecting a bunch of information? Are you waiting for other things to click? I know that's a loaded question, but where do you feel like you're at with your demonstrations?
with our demos, I think now we're in a good spot in the sense that like that story, it resonates and it's structured in a way where we're building the ROI in kind of at the beginning. With, because ultimately to close a deal, they need to take it to their upper management and say, we need to spend X, but it's going to generate Y returns, and we need to help make that business case. So I think, you know, obviously every step we're looking for ways to get better. I mean, one thing that I learned, and this is from that kind of sales mentor that gave me some good feedback, was like, listen, if you need that upper management, the one with the budget, to see the demo before you give them the price. Because what will happen is like, you may have a director that absolutely loves it, but all they're gonna be bringing to the GM is like, hey, here's how much it costs, and I really like it. And the GM, without seeing the value, without like seeing that demo where they're kind of pumped about it too, they're just gonna be like, man, that's a lot of money. Have you thought about this? I don't know. And then you're asking that director or VP to like defend your product when really they don't know your product as well as you do, right?
Sure.
They saw a demo and they'll be like, oh, I think it could help us do this better. But you know, they're not gonna go to bat, go to war like you could. So
Right.
I thought that was really, you know, that's something where I'm like, oh shoot, I need to start doing that. Where it's like, hey, if we're doing pricing, we at least need to have some kind of product conversation with that budget holder before we give pricing. So like from actually demoing the product, I think we have that tight where it's like our best features that, okay, you are going to sell more with TRIO, like that comes across in the demo. It's the getting to a close is where like, I feel like our close percentage isn't high enough yet for how good our product is. So that's where That's where I think we're at.
Well, some of it too is, I mean, it's just new, right? So until you have like large scale acceptance, that's going to get you your fastest, closes on your sales cycle. But yeah, I think, that's interesting that you bring that up because I don't think we've demoed to one GM ever. So it usually, and again, we're talking about different segments within the gaming industry, right? You're talking to the marketing side and we're talking to the operations side. So it may be a little bit different, but I don't know. It's so hard to say. I guess I don't know how many deals we've lost because of that. And you're absolutely right. If you have an advocate, I think the biggest thing to us is we have to present what the ROI is, relative to the cost. But a lot of it is just like this. It's this. What is it? You have intrinsic and extrinsic value. Like, so a lot of, I think what the executives are buying with what we're doing is the capacity for things that can't be defined yet, which is kind of weird and has made things a little bit difficult at times. But it's really been like this huge key is as soon as they see what we're doing and see the next things that we're building and how fast we've built, their minds start going to the fourth or fifth or sixth thing that doesn't even exist yet. And that's helped us, I think, on the closing side. So that's the first part. But the second part is that kind of mid-level management, the people that are in between the executive level and the day-to-day level, where they kind of have a foot on both sides of it. Like what I've seen from a lot of the really talented executives is they understand how crucial that middle portion of the puzzle is. And so anything that they can do to make that person's life better and make them more powerful, they know is ultimately going to lead to better results for them. And that's what we've seen a lot lately.
And you're saying like the GM, that upper level, they want just that mid-level to be happy.
So yeah, so like we have like the director of operations or the VP of slots is like typically the highest level we talk to, but we don't really meet with them as much as you would think. We're here at this like mid management level, depending on the size of the property, right? I mean, the really big ones, they might be, VPs or analysts, things of that nature, but they basically they're the bridge, they're the conduit is what I call them to the executive slot director who's really like talking about game placement, floor design, purchasing, those long-term like strategic things. Whereas from there to these individuals, these analysts and these technical head of operations or operations directors in the slot department, they're in charge of all the technicians. They're in charge of all these day-to-day processes. And so if they can make those people, make their jobs easier, they're going to get the data that they want. And the justification comes really to me at this middle level. It's been interesting.
Now, do you think when people buy your product, is it generally already budgeted for just generic slot technology and so it's easy to get budget, or are they getting a request for new budget, or like?
Yeah, it's usually new, man. We're usually not in there because I mean they don't. I think there's been one time where we ran into somebody that had some money earmarked for inventory, but they didn't know what they were going to buy because they couldn't find it. And we essentially took that capital and were able to move into the property on that level. But most of the time it's not. It's like, oh, we didn't even know this thing existed. Like, what can we do to, and so we're flexible in the way we deploy and how we bill and all that kind of stuff too, to try and catch those budget cycles, because we don't necessarily want to wait a whole year to get somebody on it. And a lot of times they don't either, you know what I mean? So yeah, a lot of the time we're not I would say 90% of the time we're not in the budget.
Yeah, I think, again, that's one of those things where that's like the area I'm most focused on now, where it's like it's kind of like, all right, how do you get the demos? It's like we got a good machine there. We're starting to get more and more demos. And then it's like, all right, how do you get the people you're demoing excited about the product? And I think we're doing that really well. Like demos never end where they're like, I just don't see it. It's like, right, they're all pumped about it. But then I feel like for us, I need to get better at that. Like, all right, how do I help them sell the value? And it's either like, we need to get them at least to see a quick demo, or we need to like get our material better that they can use to sell the price. Because a lot of times for us, it is new budget. So they need to justify, they need to sell to the GM or whoever, hey, we need an extra X dollars per month or annually to get this new product. And they're like, I don't know if I want to do that, and without them being very equipped to sell it and be like, no, it's going to be 5x what our investment is, 10x. Yeah, that's just where I need to focus. But that's interesting to hear that with your product, it seems like that hasn't been an issue. It's like, hey, we need this, and they're able to get it pretty easily without you even having to talk to the CFO or GM or anything like that.
Yeah, typically we don't. I mean, the only real ancillary department that ends up in our discussions is the IT department, and that's about it. And that just depends on the deployment. But let me ask you this, because this is kind of interesting to me, is how much of what you're talking about do you think can be addressed by crafting that's going to come with the crafting of success stories by like a marquee user, right? Because I mean, you and I know the same. Like, if you can say you're at casino XYZ and they've been using your product for this long, do you think that that absolves some of that process and that it makes it a lot easier to justify, in the market?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that takes away so much anxiety when there's a casino that people recognize. Because that's it. No one wants to make a fatal mistake with
Sure.
a critical piece of software, because they could lose their jobs, right? If it's like that, a big project. And so that would make things a lot easier. And yeah, absolutely. So but it's all about getting there, right? So now we've got two customers. We're working on 3 and 4, and it's going to snowball, and we know that because the product's good. But yeah, like just getting that credibility, that makes everything so much easier. Yeah,
and that was a huge thing for us. Like, I mean, when we're having this conversation, I'm trying to examine like the backlog of everything that's transpired over the years. I mean, I don't think it was any one thing, right? So it's so funny. We always talk about Volante and like what that means, and we talk about this iterative approach, right? So not the antithesis of the doom loop, right? Which is one thing changed and now everything changed. Yeah, that's not how it works, right? So it's been this organic push. I couldn't tell you any one thing, but I think it was the culmination of changing the approach, getting some more confidence, building more functionality, getting that marquee customer. And so it's weird when you think of it in terms of where you think you were, where you think you are, and where you think you need to go. There's just like 100 ingredients that are making its way into that dish, and you don't necessarily always know what's going to cause that catalyst, because there isn't one, right? It's the culmination of all of those things.
And you're right, they all feed on each other. And it's also like, it makes the product better, because not only are you getting more credibility, but now it's like, we've heard this now from 3 different people. It's like, okay, we gotta get in on that. And then all of a sudden your demos are better because you've got a new product that's going to resonate with 80% or a new module that 80% of your customers or potential customers are going to see and be like, oh, we need that. So it's definitely the flywheel effect. You get more credibility, better product, then it's easier to sell.
See, I knew we were going to have this conversation someday, and that's why I named my company after a flywheel, because it's a perfect little segue marketing pitch into that. But it makes a lot of sense, man. It's funny because I don't necessarily see you guys as us 3 years ago. I just see like this series of common, attributes that are floating in the sky, and based on the discussions that we have, I know you'll ultimately get to where you need to be. So it's funny because when you go like, well, where you guys were or where you're at, it's like, I feel like we're in the same space even now. It's just that those attributes are at different levels, right, of harmony, and eventually they'll meet where you need them to, and then it'll just be a new set of stuff that we have to tackle after that.
Amen. Well, Juan, this is fun as always. I'm looking forward to our first in-person conversation interview. And I'm admiring the whiskey bottle, so maybe we'll have to have one of those in each of our hands when we do the next interview.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be cause for celebration, right? I mean, everyone that's been to Vegas tells me it's booming right now. So there's going to be just a ton of people there, and I'm excited to see a bunch of people that I haven't seen in now a year and a half or 2 years, and it'd be good to meet you face to face, and we most certainly will have some whiskey. So I look forward to it, man, and I look forward to meeting your team and learning what you guys put together and seeing it in 3D space.
Well, cheers, and I'll see you in Vegas.
See you in Vegas, man. Good talking to you.